all blues. Okay, so all blues, Miles Davis. This is a tune that most people play, and there are a few things that I think are often missed that I'm going to talk about. You know, one of the things you should do when you learn these tunes from Kind of Blue is, of course, listen to all of the musicians. So listen to Bill Evans, listen to Cannonball Adderley, listen to Coltrane, listen to Miles, Paul Chambers, and Jimmy Cobb. And then some of these tunes have, I think this one actually has Wynton Kelly on it, I believe. Well, the album does anyway, has two pianists. But to listen to all of the players so that you get a sense of the different approaches to the basic structure. And so I'm going to go through some basic and some less basic ways of addressing each of these harmonies. But it's good to know some of the basic parts, like the famous bass line. Which, by the way, iReal doesn't know that bass line, but that's a good one to know. Another thing about this tune that's often missed regarding the bass line is that when it goes to the 4 chord, when it goes to the C7 chord there, C7 over G, the bass line doesn't change. So the harmony changes from G7 to the 4 chord, but it's the 4 chord over G, so it has more of a modal feel to it. So the bass just persists on. And then there are these horn backgrounds that are in thirds, and they work great on the guitar. So there's the setup in the tune where those are going to be diatonic to the 2 parent scales that are covered for that 1 chord and then the 4 chord that's over the G pedal. So there are various other things you could learn that are part of the arrangement, part of the composition, but I think being aware that, you know, this is sort of you could call it a modal blues in the sense that it's pretty focused on the G Mixolydian mode on the 1 chord. So that's C major from the note G. And then when he goes to the 4 chord, you can play a variety of things. A basic sound would be to play C Mixolydian, which is from F major. So from C to C, but through the F scale. So on the piano, it'd be all white keys for the 1 chord, and then it would be B flat on the 4 chord. So we need to see that on the guitar. We need to see, you know, all of the white keys on the guitar in order to improvise on this. and then learn to shift all the B's to the flat, to B flat when it goes to the 4 chord. So I'll kind of help you out with some basic ideas with those 2 parent scales first, and then we'll go in later and we'll look at where the progression goes to this D7, sharp 9 chord, and E flat 7, sharp 9 chords, and what to do over those. So first, with G major, let's just dive in a random spot and we'll start to cover the neck. One of the things you can do is just play G major triads. What did I do? I played a root position triad. Then I played the first inversion. Second inversion, and then first inversion. So no, in the key of G Mixolydian, not really the key, but in the mode of G Mixolydian, we have these triads. We have G major, A minor, B diminished, C major, D minor, I'll switch strings here, E minor, F major, and G major. I think about the harmonized scale because if you listen to the original recording and you listen to Miles's solo, there are points where he gets this beautiful harmonic effect, and I realized once, just transcribing it or hearing it, playing along with it, that he was playing an A minor triad over the G chord. So he's playing, he's listening for how these different triads from the scale, from the mode, how they color the underlying harmony. So we could do a similar thing, you know, we could experiment with, for example, here's G and F, kind of important parts of a G7 chord, but put an A minor chord on top of it, A minor triad. He's more in this territory. But he's playing that kind of thing over the G dominant blues kind of sound. So I think it's a good thing to kind of have all of those at your disposal when improvising, all of the different triads within the mode. And again, they are G major, A minor, B diminished, C, D minor, E minor, F, and G. I'll play a little bit over the form again, just to show you how these different triads sound over the chord. And I think I'll start on A minor. So I'll play some A minor stuff and listen to the color it creates. And then I kind of resolved it to the third of the G7 chord. So as we're learning the scale, the mode, learning G Mixolydian all over the neck, we should also learn those triads that are in the key all over the neck. So we could do a similar thing if we were to take, for example, now the 4 chord, when it goes to the C7 over G, we're in the key of F really, because C Mixolydian is the 5th mode of F major. And so in here we could play things like an F major triad, a G minor triad over C, right? An A minor triad again, a B flat major triad, a C triad, D minor triad, E diminished triad, F major triad again. And all of those sounds are sort of cut from the same cloth as the basic harmony, the C Mixolydian harmony. but they give us lots of nice options for melodic designs. So I'll play a little bit more, and this time I'll extend into the 4 chord. I'll stop it when it gets to the D7 sharp 9, but what I'm going to do is make arpeggio lines in C major and F major, or you could think of it as G Mixolydian and C Mixolydian. So these lines are going to be exploring superimposing triads from the mode. Check it out. That's E diminished. E minor, so the B flat goes to B. And then we're at the D7. So that's kind of a short example, but if you listen to the improvisation I did at the beginning of the video, you're going to hear some of those structures in there. Okay, so now I said that the basic choice is to do Mixolydian on those 2 chords. Another thing that we can think about is how to use minor pentatonics that are going to be sort of like what I think of as like diatonic minor pentatonics. So over G7, we can play D minor pentatonic because D minor pentatonic has all notes from C major. So the parent scale, C major, kind of births both G Mixolydian and D minor pentatonic. Take a listen. Actually, I'll do E minor and D minor pentatonic over the G7 chord. Take a listen to this. G minor, A minor, D minor pentatonic. Now, we're going into the other thing, the kind of D7 sharp 9 stuff that I'll talk about later. So you've got the mode, the Mixolydian mode for each of those chords. Then you've got minor pentatonics that are diatonic to the mode, and they're built on, in the case of G7, you've got a D minor pentatonic, an E minor pentatonic, and those sound great over G7 or G13. Then when you go to C7 or C13, you can play G minor pentatonic and A minor pentatonic. And then we're back to our G7. So we've got modes, we've got the option to play triads that are diatonic, like the harmonized scale, harmonized parent scale, and then we've got the pentatonic option as well. That actually puts you in really good shape for those 2 chords, but to make this an information-rich video, I'm going to show you one more option, which is a little more outside, and I think I hear Coltrane doing this a little bit, and this is to play melodic minor on the 5th of the dominant chord. So let me demonstrate here. I'm going to play D melodic minor over the 1 chord, the G chord. I'm going to play G melodic minor over the 4 chord. It would sound like this. So you can hear how this sound, really what it creates is this kind of a chord, which was Montgomery played all the time. What is this? This is the 1, flat 7, the 9, and the sharp 11. So we have a C sharp now, which is not in G Mixolydian, but it comes from now, people might say, Dan, why don't you just call that Lydian dominant, because that's what it is. It's a Mixolydian scale with a sharp 4. Whoops. Lydian dominant. And then on the C chord it would be this sound where you've got C9 with an F sharp in it. And I'm playing G melodic minor. So you could think of it as Lydian dominant if you like, you know, a Mixolydian scale with a sharp 4, or you could just think of playing melodic minor on the 5th of the dominant chord. Either way is good, but what I find in general is that if I think of it as say G Lydian dominant, the first thought I have in my head when I'm improvising is G. So I have the thought of the root, right? And I'm trying not to always play the root first or to land on the root, but that thought of the scale G Lydian dominant kind of predisposes me to think that way when I improvise. And starting on the root all the time or ending on the root or having that kind of predisposition tends to sound less harmonically satisfying in the context of the bass, because the bass is playing the root a lot on the downbeat. So if you're kind of root oriented in your thinking, then you're getting a lot of this, you know, octaves or double octaves. So instead of thinking that way, if you think of superimposing melodic minor on the 5th, then you're predisposed to sort of think about starting on the 5th of the chord, which gives you a little bit more of a harmonic sense, but then also you're probably set up to play more of the upper structure of the harmony. You're playing kind of not so much in the bass player's territory where they're focused on the root 3rd, 5th more often than not, probably. You're thinking more up like 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. You're up on the higher part where the guitar belongs. So so D melodic minor on G7. I hear that in the Kenny Burrell a lot. And then G melodic minor on C7 or C9. Okay, so let's summarize so far. We've got the parent scales, which are C major and F major. They create the modes G Mixolydian and C Mixolydian. They also give us a bunch of triads that we can use, and we can hear Miles Davis really doing that. So we know that it's kind of part of the thinking, the tradition of thinking on this tune. And then we've talked about how you can get minor pentatonics on the 5th and the 6th of the Mixolydian mode, or you could think of it as the 2nd scale degree and the 3rd scale degree of the original parent scale, the major scale. So you've got those pentatonic options, triads, you've got the modes, Mixolydian modes are the parent scales, and then the last thing I just talked about was playing melodic minor from the 5th of the dominant. Something that, this is a little bit what Barry Harris talks about, like playing his minor scales on the 5th of a dominant. I think it's common thinking among jazz musicians. Now, let's go into some chord stuff. Let's talk about some chord voicing options. So one of the first things you want to know, and it's funny because I always tell people you should know these, and I also wrote a book about them, but I don't play them so much. It's more of a thing of like wiring the brain for harmony. One of the things you should know are like, the minimal thing is to know drop 3 and drop 2 voicings for these dominant chords, and then probably don't play them. You add tones to make them more colorful, but you've got to start from the basic knowledge, okay? So what is the basic knowledge? Well, Here's G7 drop 3. Right? G, F, B, D. And then play inversions of those. B, G, D, F. And then you have this one. D, B, F, G. And then you'd have F, D, G, B, which is hard on my guitar. I'll play it down here in open. Now, those are what we call drop 3 voicings. Check out my book if you want to learn about that. I have a drop voicing book on Amazon. You can check it out. But drop 2 voicings, they are on adjacent strings. So if I play, you probably have seen this one before. This is G7. When we talk about the caged system, we would say that this looks like D7 with a capo, right? Well, that's what's called a drop 2 voicing. And that's root position. The one next door is this one. That's the 3rd inversion. So here's 3rd inversion, root position, 1st inversion, and then 2nd inversion, or if you want to play it down here. So let's play all of those on the root C for the 4 chord, for the subdominant. And then I'll talk about why I don't play them actually. I play them sometimes, but mostly I play voicings based on these structures that have a little more color. But first, let's do it on C. So here's C7 drop 3. Then you have 1st inversion. Ooh, my hand's a little too big for that. Then you've got 2nd inversion, C7, and 3rd inversion. And we're back home to root position. The drop 2 voicings would look like this. Here's the root position, right? That's like our D7 caged type shape. And then 1st inversion looks like this. 2nd inversion, 3rd inversion, back to root position. Okay, drop 3 and drop 2 for those 2 chords. That's what we just talked about. Now, what happens is, again, the bassist is probably playing the root, maybe someone else in the band is playing the root, maybe the pianist is sophisticated and playing rootless voicings, but chances are the root is present somewhere in the band, or even if it's implied, it's good on the guitar to do this kind of thing. Check this out. I'm going to play those G dominant 7 voicings. Let's do the drop 2 ones. But I'm going to move the root to the 9th. So what happens? We get this. We get 9, 5, flat 7, 3. And it sounds more rich than if I have a doubled root. The next one is this. And if I played, instead of playing this G, I play A. That's kind of like the James Brown chord. Now I have another G dominant 9th there. Then up here, instead of playing G7 like this, I replace the root with the 9th up here. Sounds like that. And then finally, this is drop 2, 3rd inversion, G7. But we're going to put the root up to the 9th. Now, if you have some experience, you'll know that these chords, we call them like a rootless G9 chord, but really they're also D minor 6 or B minor 7 flat 5. Let me show you what I mean. This chord, G7, move the root up to an A. Now, this is either D minor 6 in 2nd inversion, A in the bass, or you could call it B minor 7 flat 5 with the flat 7 in the bass, okay? So, again, this kind of gives us some ideas for lines. My thinking can be G7, it can be D minor 6, it can be B minor 7 flat 5. I'm going to play different things on all of those if I think differently, because I'm kind of root oriented, right? the D root of the D minor 6, the B root of the B minor 7 flat 5, but it's a shifting thing. Let me show you just on the first chord. If I play D minor 6 and B minor 7 flat 5, the kind of sounds that emerge. Now, so on the 4 chord, I was playing E minor 7 flat 5, right? So you're playing a minor 6 on the 5th of the G7 chord. Is this getting to be too much? Too much insanity. Or you're playing minor 7 flat 5 on the 3rd of the dominant chord. So I play G minor 6 on C7. Or on C7 I play E minor 7 flat 5. So those chord voicings for comping, this kind of thing, let's comp a little bit. The chord voicings and the arpeggios and everything's connected, so the thinking is the same. It's just a question of playing the notes simultaneously or playing them in a linear fashion as lines. I'll comp a little bit with this idea. E minor 7 flat 5. D minor 6. So you can hear how those voicings sound rich and they sound correct, but they don't include the root, so they're a little more sophisticated. Okay, so let me tune really quickly. I think we'll talk about, finally, we'll talk about the elephant in the room. We'll talk about the D 7 sharp 9 to E flat 7 sharp 9 stuff. And this will be a little more advanced conversation here. So what a lot of people do when they see D7 sharp 9 is they'll say, oh, I know what that is, that's altered. Right? It sounds good as altered, and you could play both of these chords as an altered scale. The problem is that the melody in the original tune and what the musicians are playing here on this iconic recording is they're playing a natural 5, which is not in the altered scale. The altered scale has a flat 5 and a sharp 5. And iReal might play the natural 5 too. So here's the thing. This is a good opportunity to learn the half-whole diminished scale, the octatonic scale. And it sounds really correct on this tune. And this is one of the most important scales in jazz, and I think it's one of those things like people they usually learn it later in their development, and they learn the symmetrical applications of it and stuff later, and they put it on their like icing on the cake. Like they're a pretty good jazz musician, and then they put that in the mix and they sound a little bit better. I think it's okay to learn it just like early on and get familiar with it, because there's really only, the way I think of it, there's really only one fingering for it on the guitar because it's symmetrical, sort of like the whole tone scale, you know? So I'll show you a fingering for it, and then I'll demonstrate it in the context of this tune a little bit. So the scale itself, let's start it here, because we're going to play it over the D chord. So it's a half whole diminished, meaning we start on the root D, we play half, whole, half, whole, half, whole, half, whole. And if you count that, that's an 8-note scale. That's why it's called octatonic. A fingering for it, though, that's a little more comfortable, more positional, would be this. So I play. Let's learn that, just 4 notes per string. D, E flat, F, F sharp, A flat, or G sharp, A, B, C, D. Now what's in here? If you take every other note, or every 3rd note, you've got D, F sharp, A, C, E flat. So the D7 sharp 9 or flat 9, the sharp 9 is also in here, right? The E sharp. It perfectly matches the color of this chord. And then it has the advantage of being actually the correct one for the tune. Because Miles is playing the A natural on the D7 sharp 9, and then he plays the B natural on the E flat 7 sharp 9 chord. And then you're back to G7. So now I think this fingering is one that every guitarist should know for this scale. Here's how it goes. If I fill out the whole position, what I can think of is this. So I play D, E flat, F, F sharp. Let's do fret numbers. 4, 5, 7, 8. Then I can come down on the 3rd string. D, C, B, A flat, F sharp. Then I play F, E flat, D, C, B, A flat. So if you want to get really pro sounding on this tune, if you like, we have to practice is that little turnaround, because that's where the harmonic rhythm speeds up, and then you've got these kind of more advanced scales. So what you want to practice is, if I just move it here, you could loop this in on iReal, I think. Maybe not. There's a way to do that. Somebody can tell me in the comments. Right now, I'll just play over it once. So I'm going to play D half whole diminished, E flat half whole diminished, and then I'll resolve it to the G Mixolydian sound. So that kind of a line sounds more like what's written in the tune, in the actual composition. And I think it's a better choice than the altered scale, although you can mix these things up freely when you're improvising. You could play the altered scale, you could play the half whole diminished, you could just play arpeggios. And that sounds totally correct, and it's great. So I think, in summary, on this tune, learn the parent scales, which C major, learn to see the guitar, C major, like it's all white keys on the piano. Then move your B's to B flat. So then you have like an F major map. That's the same thing as saying G Mixolydian and C Mixolydian. You'll want to know the harmonized scale in triads for both of those parent scales so that you can superimpose triads. You also have the option of playing the minor pentatonics on the 5th and 6th of the dominant scale, the Mixolydian scale. those sound great. And then we talked also about how you could play melodic minor, superimposing it on the fifth of a dominant chord to create a Lydian dominant sound, but being a little more oriented to the fifth or the upper part of the chord instead of down on the root with your thinking. So that's a nice thing to know. And then we also spoke about the idea of learning drop 3 and drop 2 voicings, but really as a preparatory thing to really know harmony on the instrument. When I play them, I'm often adding a color tone, such as the 9th. So if I played this G7, I replace the root with the 9th, and then I might replace the 5th with the 6th. And now I've got this G13 with a flat 7, 3, a 13 and a 9, a 6 and a 9. So for comping, if you create voicings that kind of avoid the root and add color, it's going to sound better with a bassist, especially an upright bassist. It sounds much better. They'll be happier too with their intonation. So learning those drop 3 and drop 2 voicings is totally doable. I have my drop voicing book that is a really thorough, systematic guide to learning that. And then the final kind of big topic we talked about is the idea of the half-whole diminished scale, and playing that on these 2 dominant 7 sharp 9 chords, because the original tune has the natural 5 in the melody. So it sounds like it's like I always say it, it sounds cut from the same cloth, because it's just, you feel like you're improvising with the materials of the original composed structure. I think that's mostly what we did today, so that's the review. Again, check out my drop voicing book for more ideas on that. And I also have a book called, I have a series called Jazz Guitar Genius on Amazon, and that will teach you about modes. There's one for modes, and there's one for arpeggios as well. And I think, yeah, actually there's one for triads too. So all of these topics are covered in those books. You can buy them as a Kindle book or paperback. And some of those books have tab. Most of them have tab. So check those out. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode.